Good day. Today is May 7th, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm joined, as always, by my good friends here. I've got Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
That would be me.
Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
And department head of applied politics on applied politics and public affairs at Mackinac College, and Senator-elect Erika Barootes.
Well, thank you for getting that right on some of it.
Some. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Alberta Revolution has begun. It is damn near close to official. Albertans will be voting on the possibility of becoming an independent country in 2026. This is no longer pie in the sky, pipe dream stuff. This is no longer an angry screed on the pages of the Western Standard. It is actually happening. We're going to be talking about it and getting into it. We'll also be talking about if Saskatchewan will be joining Alberta in the independence movement. A lot going on there. And elbows up, knees down. Mark Carney goes to Washington to meet with President Trump. Were his elbows as up and as sharp as he promised they'd be before the election? Spoiler alert, they were not. All right. Well, we'll get into it here. I'll begin with you, Cory. The independence, I think it's very first iterations in Alberta. They go back to the Northwest Rebellion with Louis Riel, go to the 1930s, the very inkling of the first movement for it. The 1980s, 2001, 2019 Wexit. It's, the movement, like a wave, as you've put it, comes closer and ashore every time. But this time, it's just come a hell of a lot. This is a tsunami coming into the mainland here. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has said that her government is amending the Citizens Initiative legislation to change the bar for signatures from impossible to difficult. And even with difficult, I don't think that the organizers are actually going to have that hard of a time. There is clearly enough momentum behind it. She gave an address to Alberta yesterday. Nigel and I covered that live. Mm-hmm. And in it, she said what we all know, that in all probability, Albertans will be having a vote on independence in 2026. It's real.
Well, yeah, I've been waiting a long time, at least for that kick at the cat. I mean, whether or not we're going to hit those sort of winning conditions by the time that vote comes, well, there's a lot to be covered in the course of a year. But this is the strongest language from an Alberta premier we've ever seen. She hasn't come straight out and said she supports independence. She's made it clear she wants Alberta to be independent within a united Canada. But at the same time, she put out a bunch of demands, which I don't think are unreasonable, but she knows as well as anybody, there's no way that Mark Carney is going to meet those demands. Thus, the fires are going to only become lit more. And also, she has given the mechanism for an independence referendum to be held and put it in the hands of citizens. So it will be held. And, we're in for some interesting times. Either Central Canada is going to start making some concessions, or that, because she's put the demands on the wall, the frustration of Albertans is going to grow. Mm-hmm. And those winning conditions might come about.
Erika, I don't know if the word revolution here is too strong or not. Even though it's about leaving Canada, I think it's still a Canadian-style revolution, as in no one gets hurt, and we'll try to do it legally if possible. There's only been a few revolutions that kind of fit that description in history, but I think this is one of the most revolutionary moments in Canadian political history at this point. No premier, I would note her language. She said, those who are in the independence camp, their beefs are legitimate and serious, and we should take them seriously. They're not a fringe minority. On the other side, there's those who are federalists at all cost, and be nice to them. Then there's people like me, who believe we can achieve a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I parse that language because I feel like this was a very carefully written speech. And I parse that to mean she is not a unconditional federalist. Because she talked about the unconditional federalists.
She's not Jason Kenney.
And she did not put them in the same... Yeah, she did not put herself in the same camp as Kenney, who has declared himself to be an unconditional federalist.
Yeah.
Just saying, she is not... I read from it. Tubby, I want your read from it. I took from it that she is not yet in the independence right now camp. But I took from that she could be.
You know what? I mean, this also comes after the caucus discussion last Friday. And so I do suspect you are pretty accurate in your analysis, because I'm sure that there are. And we've seen some go a little bit rogue, talking to the Red Deer Advocate, for example, about their desires. So I do think that there's probably a mixing caucus of being on one of the other ends of those spectrums. And so where I think Premier Smith is hitting the mark is that she's coming out and saying, listen, this isn't off the table in the sense that there is due process, and one that now the thresholds have been lowered to actually come to fruition if there is a significant amount of Albertans that want to have that conversation. I think there's many of us that want to just have the conversation to see where we sit. But I think as the premier and within Confederation, her job right now is to push the federal government to see if they will change the tune that we've seen for 9 years. So she's pushing on them to make sure that they're coming and meeting those demands, negotiating, coming to the table, trying to work with Alberta. And I do hope that Prime Minister Mark Carney does so. But she's got to keep being premier and look for solutions. Well, like you said, these groups can operate through the democratic process that is in place for citizen-led initiative referendums. And like you alluded to, the earliest I think we'll see that is during the municipal election in October.
Nigel, well, I think she said the referendums won't be held, but the municipal elections in October, that they'll be held in
not the citizen-led one. She said her own referendums based on the Fair Deal panel, I believe.
I got the impression that they would be all held in conjunction.
2026. I hope they're 2026. Okay, so I hope I'm wrong, and the reason I say that is because I think there's a lot of education that people need to have on what this would actually mean, one way or the other. We are landlocked, so if it doesn't come forward before 2026, I think that'll give enough time for one, people to collect signatures if that's the case, and then two, to actually be educated on the pros and cons of both.
So a lot of I think actually Cory used the term, Erika I think was intimating it here, about the concept of winning conditions. This is a term, as best I know, was coined by Lucien Bouchard, who had led the Quebec independence movement up to the 1995 referendum, and then took on as premier after that. But he took some pressure for not holding a third referendum. And his reply to that was that we have to create winning conditions. And I think that was actually, no, Quebec has not yet had its third referendum, but for good reason. It would not have won. If you're going to have that referendum, you have to have winning conditions. And this is one of the things the independence movement in Alberta, in its less sophisticated forms, is strained to understand that it's not a good idea to hold this unless you've at least got a chance of winning. In my, Cory and I have both led hopeless Thermopylae style struggles for independence with our own parties over the years. But I had put together when I was doing my own time in it. The plan was called Equality or Independence, because I do not believe Albertans will vote for independence unless we have exhausted all reasonable hope to achieve equality and fairness within Canada first. I think there is a 0% chance it ever happens. But for Albertans not paying attention to this stuff 24 hours a day, they don't necessarily know this. So I think Smith, by putting up her demands, which are eminently reasonable, they don't include any constitutional reform. And for me, my minimum list includes constitutional reform, but hers did not. So they're actually quite achievable if the Liberals were interested in keeping Alberta in Canada. But I see this if you believe that she actually does want to move towards independence, as creating winning conditions, or at a minimum, trying making it. I don't know, do you think this is making a real last ditch effort at equality before independence, or do you think it's also perhaps creating so-called winning conditions that if Ottawa rejects these very fairly easy to meet, I shouldn't say easy, but very reasonable to meet demands to achieve at least some semblance of equality within Canada, if it can't be met, that it's setting the independence movement up for its winning conditions in that 2026 independence referendum?
Yes, I think it is. You know, the reaction to the election result last week was one of frustration and disgust. And in that atmosphere, you can get a lot of people, yeah, we need to separate. Well, let's get out of here. We never take it seriously. That feeling doesn't have long legs. Eventually, people say, well, you know, what about the Canada Pension Plan? What about the, you know, I'm going to get my OAS? What about this? What about that? We've got to do something for the Indians. That's going to need to work into this. It's all too much trouble. So all of those kinds of objections have to be met with a reasonable solution before people are going to really take this seriously. And the other thing, which would be a winning condition, which is not really in the hands of Alberta to create, but is in the hands of Mr. Carney, is whether the energy industry and the mining industry and the bauxite and as Saskatchewan, but, you know, are they going to let us make some money here? Because if Mr. Carney actually wanted to precipitate the conditions where Albertans would go to the polls and choose some other arrangement than the present one, that's all he would have to do is to renege on the promises that he made during the election, that there would be progress on these files. There would be pipelines, there would be energy corridors, there would be encouragement to invest in fossil fuels, which is something that he's fought against for decades. But if he will do those things, then actually I think that there's some chance that he would find a willing dance partner in Danielle Smith. Certainly he would remove from her the objection that Ottawa never listens, because if Ottawa starts listening, then she really can't go very far down the independence track.
Erika, what's your sense within the caucus right now? You know, behind closed doors, we know it's very far from strong support for unconditional federalism. We've had Jason Steffen, for all intents and purposes, declare himself for independence. I mean, 99% of the way there, and I think he's trying to leave a toe on the ledge, but for all intents and purposes, he's in. Behind closed doors, we both know it's less than public. How many, if you could gander a guess, like how much are we going to see currently elected politicians actually come out and declare themselves for independence here?
I don't think you're going to see a lot. I was actually very surprised that Jason Steffen did that. I've had conversations with him. There was the Central Alberta Leaders Dinner last week, kind of right as all of this was coming out. And so, you know, I think a lot want to have the conversation because they're hearing from their constituents since the election how frustrated they are. They want the government to push Ottawa and really stand up, like almost Hail Mary it. Like I think you're right. We want equality or to leave. And so with the equality piece, they don't want to leave any stone unturned. And so I would guess that most of the sentiment, because it does also equal their future fate as a caucus, as a governing party, what they look like in their career space, also is something that they've got to balance, right, through this. But I think most you will see defer, as the premier kind of has, to the Albertans, and in that case, each of their constituents. I do know, though, that many of those people in Central Alberta that were at the supper were very keen to have this conversation. So I don't think it's going to go away. I think if we've learned anything from COVID, and I think the premier was speaking to that tone a little bit during her remarks on Monday, was that this is not divisive. This is not about fear mongering either side. Let's let this process take course and not alienate people for feeling one way or the other. I suspect that that's where, like COVID, individuals were wanting their elected officials in their MLA to say one way or the other. But I think what they're going to do is put it back to them, which they couldn't do during COVID, and say, well, you get to decide, not me. I was elected under a very different mandate, very different scenario than Quebec was, which was a party elected on a mandate to separate. And so I think these guys are going to be way quieter. I hope that caucus confidentiality remains quite top of mind for everyone, because this is a very hard thing, probably the hardest thing that Premier Smith is going to have to navigate. And also very difficult for Prime Minister Carney, because you're right, there's a lot of things that as Albertans we believe is completely obtainable. However, in order to keep government, he has to work with anti-pipeline, anti-Alberta resource entities in both the Bloc to get one of Premier's demands, which is access to Tidewater out the east, and the NDP who hate pipelines. So it's going to be challenging for both our provincial and our federal leader.
They really do have a common interest in, actually, they have a common interest in developing the energy industry, because Mr. Carney has inherited a shambles of an economy thanks to Mr. Trudeau. And he's promised to put it back. He says he's going to transform Canada. And if he's talking economics, which I hope is all he is talking, then he is going to need what Alberta can bring to the table.
Right. So but you have to remember that Alberta has one of their conditions to basically create a pipeline through Quebec. And that was something that the Quebec Bloc and the Liberals have said we're going to respect the sovereign nation of Quebec. So I think that's where it gets sticky. Absolutely. I think through Manitoba, through, I think it's called the Port of Churchill, you've also got out west. I think those are all fair games, but I think he's going to have to dance very, very delicately with his relationship with Quebec.
So there was something you said earlier. You hope caucus confidentiality remains intact. I very much hope the opposite of that. From
well, for TV
my job here.
No.
Remember, this is the home of Weekly Leaks, where we live blogged UCP caucus meetings when Jason Kenney was the premier. The caucus was extremely divided at that time over COVID. I imagine they're going to be quite divided over this. But it'll be difficult for her to keep that party intact, because there's going to be unconditional federalists. There's going to be people committed to independence, and then there's going to be people in the middle, and then the people the more careerist politicians among them who want to go wherever's going to win. Cory, let's talk about the organization around this stuff right now. Actually, no. Let's bring kind of the Saskatchewan side into this conversation. So, polling shows that it's a minority in both Alberta and Saskatchewan at present. The opponents of independence like to claim it's a quote fringe minority. Yet independence in Alberta and Saskatchewan scores higher than the combined NDP and Liberal vote. So, if independent supporters are a fringe minority, then so are leftists in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But Saskatchewan's always been kind of the much quieter of the two big fronts on independence in the West. That appears to be changing. They do have citizens' initiative legislation on the books, I believe, but it is even higher than Alberta's presently passed legislation before it's getting amended. It is not. Alberta's got, for all intents and purposes, impossible. Saskatchewan has actually impossible. You will never get. You couldn't get the signatures if you were declaring Puppies and Rainbow Day. The NDP with their leader Carl Levesque have been really trying to kick this up, debating it in the legislature. I don't expect to see Scott Moe call the referendum himself, but is there any sign that the Saskatchewan government's going to amend their legislation so that you could have a citizens' initiative ballot on this?
I haven't seen a sign of it. I know Nadine Ness has been operating with that group out in Saskatchewan, trying to move the party to fixing that legislation as Alberta did. I think that pressure is going to come now that Premier Smith has set that precedent. And it has exposed that legislation. I'm sure a lot of Saskatchewan citizens now are looking at it for the first time and realizing, wow, this legislation is trash. If we're interested in this, we need it amended. I think it's very possible. I mean, it's a good wedge issue between well, in their case, the Saskatchewan Party and the NDP. And as you said, when they're trying to dismiss the independence movement, when we're talking 30%, that you can't dismiss that. Revolutions have started with much smaller numbers than that before.
And it's 30% of the general public, a majority of Saskatchewan Party voters, and a majority of UCP voters, which is why the UCP has to respond to this, and why I think the Saskatchewan Party is going to be under a ton of pressure to respond to it.
Yeah, well, and Premier Smith gave a good way to take the pressure off, in a sense anyways, where the Premier doesn't have to take a stance on one side or the other of independence, just saying, I'm putting the mechanism for these decisions in the hands of the citizens. Here it is. We understand that our current legislation was inadequate. This is the amendment. And if the citizens choose to go in this route and have that sort of referendum, we will hold it and we'll see what they think and we can put it to rest. It gives the premiers a bit of an out, in a sense. Just keep saying it's up to the people.
Nigel, I think the NDP in both Alberta and Saskatchewan is in a better political position because their voters almost entirely agree they're unconditional federalists. Whereas UCP voters in Alberta, Sask Party voters there, are quite divided. Majorities of voters in both parties are in support of independence right now, but there is a significant minority of Sask Party and UCP voters who are, at least at present, still committed to federalism. A smaller minority of there are probably unconditional federalists. I don't think Danielle Smith can remain neutral forever. I think she can for some time, but I think the pressure is going to grow. I would be very surprised if the UCP at its next convention its members don't actually vote outright for independence, because that's where the members are. The caucus is probably not as far there, and the premier's not there yet. But its voters are, and I think its members are. Could she stay neutral on this to the end?
Well, and she has to, as long as she possibly can, and hopefully that's to the end. Don't forget the oath of office that she took binds her to the system that we have.
The Bloc took the same oath, so I don't think it's really with the scrap of paper it's written on if the Bloc could take it.
The difference is that when the Bloc does it, they have their fingers crossed behind their back. I think that Danielle was entirely straight up on that.
Keep in mind that the oath is to the crown and whatnot, and not to the it's not the Pledge of Allegiance to the indivisibility of the Canadian state. I don't think there is anything in the oath that says you have to be an unconditional part of the Canadian Dominion.
People who want a Republic of Saskatchewan or a Republic of Alberta will be sorry to hear that, because that's what they're pitching.
If you're okay, but I guess we have to quibble a bit. Independence does not necessarily mean republic. It very possibly does, but not necessarily.
Actually, I think it would, if it remained a monarchy, it would make life very much easier dealing with the Indigenous element to all of this, which is, of course, the treaties 6, 7, and 8 that run across BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and into the Northwest Territories. So, I mean, they're one of the real concerns as to how you handle the Indigenous component. It's there. People are going to be right now very enthusiastic about it, but as you said yourself, creating the winning conditions is necessary. And these are some of the difficulties and the obstacles that you're going to have to work out, and that people are going to have to be satisfied on. Now, specifically to Danielle Smith's strategy, she, as a premier, having taken an oath to the Queen, or to the King, I should say, can't stand there and hold up her hand and say, I'm all for breaking up the country. Very, very difficult position to hold and justify. So in some ways, if that is truly what she wants and how she feels, she too has to create the winning conditions for her, which is to have it come from the people. This is what we want. We want a referendum. You have the referendum. You get a pro-independence result. At that point, she can move. You're right that it's going to be difficult, but she should be able to do it.
I
beg to differ.
I beg to differ.
I dare say.
In fact, I think she needs to lead the movement. I think we need being a leader means listening to those under you, executing the will of the people, but also leading the people to where you believe is best for them to go when you've considered all the options.
Well, being a successful leader means knowing when to take your position at the front of the parade.
Fair enough, and it's probably not time
quite
yet.
there yet.
Not there yet, but
assuming that is what she wants.
Well,
I don't actually have those little electric wires into the back of her brain that give me the confidence to say
no. But also, it'll be interesting to see, does putting this to a citizens' initiative but staying neutral, Erika, keep these these small and newborn independence parties at bay, or is she going to have to take an even harder line? We've got, Alberta has a cottage industry of these parties. I've led one, Cory's led one. They haven't tended to go anywhere, but there was never the winning conditions as well. There's a lot of reasons they may have not gone anywhere. You've got the Republicans now, which is the renamed Buffalo Party. Seems to be at least successful in collecting email addresses. But don't sneeze at that. That's actually a part of building.
I
your
didn't.
list.
That was Cory.
I know. Yeah. Sorry. I'm not. That was Cory sneezing.
Sneezing.
It's a part of the process. Do you think she's gone far enough to head these parties off at the pass, or do you think as this progresses, she's going to be pushed to potentially join a direct side in this?
I think for the time being, she has pushed hard enough. She's definitely doing more than anyone else. We haven't heard this same, and I am in the beautiful city of Regina right now. And so she has done more than Premier Scott Moe has come out and said. So I think she has the legislative mechanisms in place. So I think she's got some runway here, but you're right. Should this come to fruition, should there be a citizen-led initiative that's actually coming to table, then I think she'll have to make a move. But for a lot of folks that are kind of in the middle that want to have the conversation, might support and sign up to have the citizen-led initiative referendum question, I think want her to also be premier right now and continue to try and fix the broken relationship with Ottawa. And I think if she says I'm pro-separation, that's kind of dead on arrival. And I think she's going to probably piss off more people than she pleases by doing it too soon. So I do think she has a lot of runway. I know we were talking about what's on the ground in Saskatchewan of talks. I got here late last night, had supper with my Nana. And she didn't bring it up, so we didn't talk about it. But I am going to be talking to folks the next couple of days and see if it's the same sentiment. I have had many of them reach out saying, do we have to move to Alberta following this election results on last Monday? But I don't get the same. But growing up, being born and raised in Saskatchewan, there's never been, or I never had the pro-Saskatchewan or like Saskatchewan first, Canada second mentality that I do see in Alberta. So I think it's going to be a different approach that we see from Saskatchewan. They're also the size of Edmonton. So, what does that look like versus what we see from the masses in Alberta? But to answer your question, I think Premier's good for now. I think she's kind of came out of the gate properly so to address it because it's a real conversation. I don't know if that's the case with Saskatchewan, but I'll keep my ears to the ground.
I look forward to you reporting back on how that's going. A good column in the works, perhaps.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll finish. We'll tie off this conversation. Just this last question to you, Nigel. In the Premier's address, she said that any referendum question on independence will have to respect Indian, Métis, and Inuit rights. Because we've had the chiefs, the three treaty chiefs, pretty strenuous, adamantly against this, and that raised a question. And we had one of our reporters in Edmonton put that question to Premier Smith, saying, "Okay, well, said that the question would have to respect treaty rights. Well, what would that question look like? Would we have to negotiate with native bands and nations before, and then include that into question? Or because the Clarity Act states you have to have a clear question and receive a clear majority on it. Okay. And then afterwards, you get into consultations and negotiations with Ottawa, other provinces, First Nations, that kind of thing. That comes after. So we put the question to her very, very, very succinctly. What does that question look like? And she didn't really give a. I didn't think she actually had a great
answer at all.
No, there wasn't.
Let's be honest about it. She didn't want to deal with it, so she basically said, "Well, right now we don't have a referendum, so talking about a question is kind of too pointless." But there's quite a lot in. I'm not sure really why she said that, other than perhaps to just establish a position to which she could refer back when people hostile to the idea would say, well, Premier Smith, you can't have independence because you've got natives in your Indigenous people here in Alberta. They have a treaty obligation to the Crown, and nothing can possibly ever happen because of them. I don't think that's a position that she would accept if she was pro-independence. It was curious that she named Indigenous people, the Métis, and Inuit. We don't have any Inuit in Alberta.
I didn't say that because I'm not positive, but I mean, like if you're giving me a bet, I'll give you good odds.
Maybe the odd one at the University of Alberta studying psychology or something.
Use that the Edmonton Eskimos.
I think you probably got more Inuit than the Eskimos there than you have anywhere else in Alberta. So look, the situation of the Métis is perhaps a little more complicated. They've never had treaties with the Dominion government or with the government of Canada as it's now constituted. Now, Alberta gave them their settlements in northern Alberta. So I suppose their ownership of land is guaranteed. And I can't see how this would be, whatever the government of Alberta is, they have a relationship with it, which would give them the security that they want. There are other special rights they now have that may have been created by federal legislation, but I don't think this is a constitutional issue. And then, of course, you come to the Indigenous have their treaties, and they must be respected. But that doesn't mean they have or should have a veto over the separation independence movement in Alberta, if that's what comes about. Canada could transfer all its treaty obligations to Alberta, just as we got a precedent for this. I mean, back in 1982, Great Britain transferred all of its constitutional obligations regarding Canada to Canada. So if we're, we pass these things along like a hot potato.
We've done it before.
We've done it before. So this could be done in the amendment to the Canadian Constitution that redesignated whatever kind of status Alberta was going to have. So I mean, there certainly is an issue in there. I don't know why she brought it up now, other than just as a little position to pull back on.
She brought it up because of all the open letters that were coming, and she couldn't get away with it. So I think she weaved it into as like, I recognize that these individuals have come forward. They're issuing, letters and publicly making statements about this. I think it was just to maybe say, listen, I heard you. That's great. We'll consider that. I don't think she was saying anything except getting ahead of or addressing something that was going to come up in questions, right?
Okay.
She knew a reporter was going to ask. So she just can now point to her statement and said, hey, I'm listening, right?
Yep. Yeah. And don't bother me about this again.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, our next topic's headline, this was one recommended by the Western Center's Director of Operations, Michelle Cundy. So I'm passing the buck on the crudity of this one. Elbows up, knees down. Mark Carney in Washington. Here, let's just play a quick little video of Mark Carney putting his elbows up. Well, So you've seen, okay, so you've all seen it up there. Elbows Up was you saw them going around doing the chicken dance during the campaign. Looked like the chicken dance to me. Very undignified. I'm never doing that again. Yeah. Oh, please edit that out. Oh my God. Tough talk from Mark Carney during the campaign, Nigel. He's going to show the bad orange man. He's going to go down there, tell him what's what. He went down and did what, of course, he had to do, which is be reasonable and polite. I actually have no knock against actually what Carney did there. I think he accorded himself reasonably well for the circumstances. He did not pull a Zelensky and, sit there like a petulant child and interrupting and being a jerk, ungrateful, perhaps. He was actually very diplomatic and nice. But it's not what he promised during the campaign. He was going to go down there and punch the orange man in the face.
Well, have you ever heard a politician talk tough on a campaign and then not follow through afterwards? There's things you say on the campaign.
Danielle Smith said she's going to go fight Ottawa.
Yeah.
She's actually tougher with Ottawa after the election than during it. So this is quite the opposite.
I think that, look, Mr. Carney is, I think you had it right when you said that he conducted himself well. It's all very well to say that kind of thing on the campaign trail, but if you actually go and pull a Zelensky down in the White House, a lot of support would become very muted here in Canada. People wouldn't appreciate that. They didn't appreciate it when Justin Trudeau did stupid things. And Mr. Carney is certainly trying to set himself apart from his predecessor. You'll notice there's no socks. There's no reports of him whispering snide remarks about Mr. Trump to his friends and being picked up on a live mic. He conducted himself like a gentleman, and that's what was required. So I'm actually going to give him a pass on that. It did worry me a bit when he started talking about how he said he was elected to transform Canada. We briefly touched on this earlier in the program. As long as he's talking about turning it into an energy superpower, well, I'm with him all the way. But if he is going to continue Mr. Trudeau's experiments in social exclusion, then that's much more serious. The one thing I will say about him, by the way, and even if you think he fell flat, Derek, he had the grace to sit and listen. Trump talked for about 27 minutes. He got 3 minutes. And that other 27 minutes were Trump, Canada, they've been ripping us off for $200 billion a year, and they don't defend themselves. Now we'll always defend Canada. You see, I've heard it so many times, I can do it too. He watching his body language, you could just see he actually wanted to say something, but knew that would be the wrong thing to do. It must have been excruciating.
Yeah, Cory, I mean, we have to give credit where it's due. I expect we're gonna have harsh words for Carney as the rubber hits the road on governing here.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, I think he conducted himself as well as possible under the circumstances. He got 3 minutes to 27. I think he did it. I think he handled himself fairly, pretty well. But this is not the Mark Carney who we saw dancing with his elbows up. He's an impression of a chicken.
He showed himself. Well, he's a pragmatist. He's going to do what he feels needs to be done. But that also applies to the election. I'll say whatever I think I need to say to get elected. That's what's more troublesome. Having him follow through on his own words, as we said, and go in there screaming with Trump. I mean, Trump is a nightmare. I don't envy anybody dealing with him in any circumstance. To go in and provoke him, we know isn't going to do anybody any bloody good. But it also shows what else in Carney's campaign were words that he just uttered to get the votes, and we won't actually see a commitment from later because they'll be.
And what did he mean when he said them?
Yes, exactly.
Words can have more than one read.
Yeah. So it's off to, in that sense, a bad start on following through with his promises, but still a wise move when stepping into that lion's den.
Erika, I know this might be just a cheap shot on my part, but I mean the legacy media and even guys like us have been fairly complimentary in how Carney conducted himself in Washington with Trump.
Mhm.
But I have a feeling that if Pierre Poilievre had been there and conducted himself exactly as, if we kind of deep faked the video here and just put Poilievre's face on there,
Mhm.
he would have been denounced as elbows down, a traitor, and a sellout. I know that might be a bit too easy of a pot shot to take here, but or maybe I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, I love telling you you're wrong, so
Go ahead and do it.
I will do that. No, you know what? I don't know in this case how if Pierre would have conducted himself exactly as Carney did, which I think was like be the bigger adult in the room, and he challenged Trump on some things like saying, using his real estate analogy back at him and said, some things are never for sale, which Canada is not. Like, I think he was very appropriate in that meeting. I think the difference is like, I would hope Pierre would be the same type of pragmatist in that meeting. So if he was, though, the articles wouldn't have been like, stands toe to toe with Trump. It would have been an expected, which wasn't the case, I think, for Carney. Like, this was an introductory meeting. Let's just be clear. This wasn't expected that there was tariffs being dropped coming out of this. And that wouldn't have been and I think the difference is I think that might have been expected of Pierre Poilievre by the mainstream media. So had he conducted the same way as Carney, I think there would have been like less rah, this man's champion for going down to Trump and Trump's catering to him. All Carney had to do was to not look like Justin Trudeau and be an adult in that room. And it's clear that the narrative coming out of it is Trump likes Carney more than he likes Trudeau. But I think everyone would qualify under that. I do think that the liberal media would have pressed harder on like, why aren't there directives, or when are you going to come out with what happened in those other 90 minutes of your meeting that was private? Where can we expect tariffs to be dropped? So I don't think they'd maybe criticize that initial meeting, but I think they would be far more aggressive on, okay, what's next? Because they gave Carney an out on that and are letting him have a 2-day news cycle of wins that he didn't get mocked like Trudeau did, where I don't think they would have given Pierre that grace. So I'm disagreeing with you, kind of.
No, I'm taking it as completely agree with everything I said. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're going to go to our parting shots here. We'll start with you, Erika.
Dear Doug Ford, you continue to be in Mark Carney's shadow and just a guy in waiting, pretending to be a conservative, going to run for the Liberal Party of Canada at some point. Please grow up.
Oh, this is why I try not to piss off Erika. Okay. Cory.
Oh, I just want to speak to the certain amount of the collection of chiefs of Alberta who've been standing up and doing performative policy tearings and screaming and shouting and asserting themselves. It seems these are the same people who are standing up talking about how Canada's a colonial, genocidal, loathsome state that they're oppressed under and they're living in misery under. But the first time somebody wants to actually change the system, suddenly they're up as the strongest defenders of this colonial, genocidal state. Pick a lane, chief. And by the way, your authority doesn't extend outside of your reserve, so get over yourselves.
Oh, that's a subtle dig at something else, too. Okay. Nigel.
Say that is a shot. That is very much a parting shot. So
I'll bring that paperwork next.
Arctic shelling.
Ever since the convoy, as we know, the federal government spied on people's cell phones, froze bank accounts. The RCMP made unauthorized use of facial recognition technology. And of course, in the years in between, when we've seen Canadian Heritage giving out money to little fringe groups to go and spy on their neighbors and see if they can find anything hateful going on, report back and get more money. It's been Canada has come across as a surveillance state, and one with a definite point of view that the Liberal Party has established, which is that they're kind of left-wing progressive and out to marginalize people who are conservatives. Well, look, so here's the latest one. According to Blackhawks, they've just paid a whole bunch of money to a consultant in England to do what? Go chase after pro-Israel supporters, not Hamas, which is actually causing problems. The people who spoke up in favor of Israel. More bias from the Canadian government, brought to you by Canadian Heritage.
Okay, well, I've gone back and forth actually on what my parting shot is. Mine's actually on Pierre Poilievre today. So Joe Rogan says that he invited Pierre Poilievre to come onto his show. Some of the other major conservative podcasters in the United States invited him on. Obviously, Poilievre did not take them up on these invitations. I think he was worried, perhaps rightfully so, that that'd be seen as, oh, you're too close to these guys who like Donald Trump and Republicans. But, you know, it's a parting of the kind of courage he showed and not kowtowing to the legacy media. But he's been afraid, not entirely, but he's been hesitant even to go on Canadian media. He didn't do, you know, he never went on the Rebel, never went on the Western Standard. So he didn't even talk to independent conservative media voices. I don't even think he went on the Hub, which is a very low risk one. He didn't talk to any of them because I think he's afraid of just being tarred with the Trump and Republican brush, which every Canadian conservative leader for all time, or at least, you know, post Stephen Baker and Joe Clark has been. But I think that was I think that was a mistake. It's obviously easy to, you know, point out what's a mistake in our armchair quarterback positions in hindsight. But I think that was a big mistake for him. That's where people are. These are massive audiences. It could have helped him in Canada. But even, you know, say he had won the election, this would help perhaps to build his credibility with an American audience, which is very important right now. So Poilievre says he's trying to learn from what's happened and be ready for the next time. I think hopefully this is one of the things he's going to learn from here. I think that was a big mistake. All right, Cory, Nigel, Erika, thank you very much, and thank all of you who have joined us today on the pipeline. The Western Standard is really one of the only. I think we are the only major homegrown Western independent media outlet coming out of Alberta right now. One of the only ones in the entire West. We rely on support from people like you to do what we do. Please go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for complete access to all Western Standard content and get past that pesky paywall that I know you guys like to complain about when you hit. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless the West.